You find a bird on the sidewalk. One wing is bent wrong. It cannot fly. Your first instinct is to help. You crouch down slowly. You talk in a soft voice, the same voice you'd use with a scared child. And the bird looks at you like you are the most terrifying thing it has ever seen. You wonder, does it have any idea you're trying to save its life? The answer is far stranger than you think. For most of human history, we assumed animals were simple. Stimulus in, reaction out. A hungry wolf sees prey. A frightened deer sees a predator. No thoughts in between, just wiring. But that idea is falling apart because animals are not just reacting to what you do. They are reading who you are. Start with elephants. In 2011, a researcher named Karen McComb at the University of Sussex ran an experiment in Amboseli National Park in Kenya. She played recorded human voices to wild elephant families through a hidden speaker. Some voices belonged to Maasai men. Maasai men in that region sometimes spear elephants in cattle disputes. Other voices belong to Kamba men, a farming community that rarely threatens elephants at all. The elephants had never seen the speaker. They had never seen a face. They only heard a voice. And within seconds, they reacted completely differently depending on which group the voice belonged to. When they heard a Maasai voice, they bunched together. They raised their trunks to smell the air. They retreated, cautious and tight, like a family closing ranks. When they heard a Kamba voice saying the exact same words, they barely reacted at all. Same species, same tone, same forest. Different history with each group of humans. The elephants had built a model in their minds of which humans were dangerous and which were not. Not from instinct, from memory. Here is where it gets stranger. The elephants could also tell the difference between men and women and between adult and child voices, using the exact same words in the exact same language. A child's voice, even a Maasai child's voice, triggered far less alarm because a child is less likely to be the one holding the spear. Think about what that requires. It requires understanding that a threat is not a species. A threat is a specific kind of individual doing a specific kind of thing, and everyone else might be safe. Now think about your own bird on the sidewalk. It does not know your name. It does not know what you had for breakfast, but it knows, on some level, what you are shaped like. It knows how fast you're moving. It knows whether your hands are reaching or still. Every wild animal alive today is running some version of the same calculation the elephants were running. Not, is this a human, but is this the kind of human, moving in the kind of way that has hurt things like me before? So does it know you're trying to help? Not in the way you mean it. It does not understand your intention, your kindness, your plan to nurse it back to health in a shoebox lined with a towel. But it is reading your behavior with far more precision than you'd expect. Slow movements, low posture, no direct eye contact, a soft, low voice instead of a loud one. These are the exact signals that, across species, separate a predator from something that is not currently a threat. You are not being recognized as a helper. You are being evaluated, moment by moment, as a possible danger that has not yet acted like one. This is not unique to elephants. Crows do something even sharper. John Marsloff, a wildlife biologist at the University of Washington, ran a study where researchers wore a specific rubber mask while trapping and briefly banding wild crows, an experience the crows clearly did not enjoy. Afterward, researchers walked around campus wearing that same mask, doing nothing threatening at all, just walking. The crows scolded them anyway, diving and screeching every single time. Years later, crows that had never even seen the original trapping still scolded the mask, because the birds who had witnessed it had somehow taught the others which face meant danger. Let that sit for a second. Crows can recognize one specific human face out of every face on a college campus. They can hold that memory for years, and they can pass the information to crows who were never there. That is not a reflex. That is something closer to a warning system, built entirely out of watching, remembering, and talking. Which brings up the harder question. If a crow can single out a bad human by face and remember it for a decade, can it also single out a good one? Some evidence says yes. Marsloff's team also found that crows given food by a specific mask wearer began approaching that mask faster over time, even gliding closer, even seeming to expect the food. That is not fear recognition anymore. That is trust recognition, built slowly, one repeated interaction at a time, the same way trust gets built between two people who barely know each other yet. But here's the twist that changes the whole picture. Trust, for a wild animal, is almost never about you specifically. It's about the pattern you represent. Brian Hare, an anthropologist at Duke University who studies animal cognition, has spent years comparing wild wolves to domestic dogs. Dogs, unlike wolves, are extraordinary at reading human gestures. Point at a cup, and a dog will check the cup. A wolf, even one raised by humans from birth, mostly will not. That skill was not learned. It was bred, generation after generation, into an animal whose ancestors survived specifically by getting good at understanding what a human wanted. Wild animals have not been bred for that. A wild bird has not had 10,000 years to build, reads human intention into its instincts. So when you help it, it is not running a "this human is kind" calculation. It is running a much older, much blunter one. This human has not hurt me in the last several seconds. That's it. That is the whole test. And it has to pass that test again and again, every single time you approach. Because for a wild animal, forgetting to be afraid is often the last mistake it ever makes. This is why your gentleness so rarely feels like relief to the animal in the moment. You know your intentions. It only knows your movements. And it has been shaped by millions of years of a world where the two did not always match. A snake that looks like it's leaving might strike. A predator that looks calm might be waiting. So even genuine kindness gets treated with the same suspicion as everything else, because suspicion historically is what kept its ancestors alive long enough to have offspring. And yet, something does change over repeated exposure. Crows learn faces, elephants learn voices. Even fish in some studies learn to associate certain divers with food instead of danger after enough repeated, non-threatening dives. So trust is possible. It is just slower and far more conditional than we like to imagine. It is built moment by moment, encounter by encounter, and it can be destroyed by a single bad one. Here's the modern mirror in all of this. You do the exact same thing every single day without noticing. You meet someone new, and before you've heard a single word from them, you are already reading their posture, their pace, their tone of voice, deciding almost instantly whether they feel safe or not. You are not thinking it through. You are running the same ancient calculation the elephants ran with the Maasai voices. Threat or not threat, evaluated in a fraction of a second, based on signals you didn't even know you were tracking. We like to think humans evaluate intention, and animals only evaluate behavior. But most of the time, so do we. We decide someone is trustworthy long before we actually know if they are. We read tone of voice, body language, the speed of someone's movements, and we build a verdict out of it, the same way a wild elephant builds a verdict out of a stranger's voice on the wind. The line between instinct and intelligence is a lot blurrier than it looks, so the next time you crouch down next to something wild and hurt, and it flinches away from your open, gentle hands, understand what is actually happening. It is not failing to see your kindness. It is running the same test every creature on Earth has always run, the one your own ancestors ran long before language, long before cities, long before you ever learned to be gentle on purpose. It is asking, in the only language it has ever known, are you the kind of thing that hurts me, or not yet? And somewhere back on that sidewalk, holding perfectly still, waiting for a wild animal to decide you're safe, you're doing something older than kindness. You're being tested, one heartbeat at a time, by an instinct that has kept living things alive since long before either of you existed. There is another layer worth knowing. Only a small number of Maslow's crows were ever actually trapped and handled, while researchers wore that rubber mask. Yet years later, crows hatched long after the original trapping still scolded that exact mask on sight. An adult crow taught its offspring what to fear, not through language, but through alarm calls and body posture. Younger birds watched, copied, and absorbed the lesson before they ever needed it. This means a wild animal's trust or distrust of humans is rarely built from scratch. It's inherited. A crow born this spring can carry a grudge against a face it has personally never seen cause harm. Somewhere, right now, there might be animal populations who learned, culturally, that all humans are dangerous based on the actions of a handful of people decades ago. Their caution isn't really about you. It's about someone else entirely, someone they never met. And this cuts both ways. Populations living near long-term wildlife sanctuaries, places where humans have spent decades only feeding, healing, and releasing, sometimes show measurably less fear of humans than animals in untouched wilderness nearby. Not from one encounter, from generations quietly absorbing the same lesson. These particular humans are not the threat. So when you help a wild animal, you're not just influencing that one creature. You might be shaving a sliver of caution off a story its descendants inherit long after you're both gone. This also explains something people get wrong about wildlife rehabilitators. Ask any of them, and they'll tell you the goal is never to be liked by the animal. A truly successful rehabilitation often ends with the animal as wary of humans as the day it arrived, sometimes more so. An animal that trusts humans too easily, once released, is walking straight toward the next person who doesn't have good intentions. The kindest outcome, from the animal's perspective, is to heal completely and never trust you again. That's a strange kind of success to sit with. You give everything to help a creature survive, and the best version of that help ends with it fleeing from you the moment it's strong enough to run. Its survival was never going to depend on knowing you personally. It was always going to depend on treating every human, including you, as a variable it couldn't afford to trust completely. Which brings the question back around to something closer to home. How many of your own instincts are running on caution you never personally earned? A flinch at a raised voice that echoes something from long before you remember. A wariness you picked up from watching someone else get hurt by it, long before it ever happened to you.